All right, so this will be my first video. I apologize if this video is not the greatest quality, as I am going to be primarily doing these basically these video log recordings on my drive home from work, since this is going to be kind of an open-ended comment form about questions about tactics that I'm going to do my best to answer. This is basically a dry run, so if it's not the greatest quality, I apologize. Anyway, we'll do some intro. So my name is Drew. I've been in the hobby for approximately since Warhammer 40,000 second edition, I believe is when it was. I was probably about 8 years old or 10 years old, so I didn't really do much playing. I was more involved in the models, but I have been in the hobby for a very long time, probably close to 20 years. And I get a lot of questions about, especially from new players, and about, you know, how to play their army and what is needed to play the game successfully. I am going to talk about in this channel mostly tactics and in-depth tactics, mainly because for me, I've been playing a very long time, and all the videos I find on YouTube are basically obvious to me. And very few people talk about the in-depth tactics and how it executes on the battlefield. So, since I'm going to be, I have probably played beyond count thousands upon thousands of games. I used to play, we'll say in the glory days, probably close to 3 games a day for almost 2 years. This was back in 5th edition, but it was extremely heavily played. Like, I played to the point where almost couldn't play anymore. And at that point, I did actually own at least a small force of every single army that Games Workshop sold at the time. So I've had experience with just about every army at some point or another, whether it be in each current edition. And if in any case, I've played against pretty much every army combination you could possibly think of. So because of this, I have a lot of information, and most of the time it just can't be talked about in a reply when someone asks me a question. I usually end up writing like 3 paragraphs. So this is going to make it so it's easier. I can break it down into sections, because a lot of times I have to re-explain my reasoning in taking things, and I like fully explaining why I take things versus just saying a straight up statement. It's very easy, especially on the internet, to read a statement and either go on the defensive and say, you know, I don't believe that because of X reason. When I use that situation, it works for me every time. Well, that being the case, because probably what you're using them for is different than what someone else is using them for. For example, Helldrakes, you know, a lot of people use them for anti-infantry, and also for taking out light skimmers and other flyers. If someone's trying to use it with the assault cannon and saying, why the hell everyone crying about Helldrakes? Now, obviously, to a good player, obviously the Flamer is something you're always going to take, and we'll get into the reasons why for that in a different video. But what I wanted to do for this video, each of these videos are going to be about an hour. I'm going to try it. I may have to break them up into different segments, but what I want to talk about in this video is basically just the beginnings of, from the perspective of a new player who's looking to start Warhammer 40K, or if you're thinking about starting to Warhammer 40K, I'm going to give you my perspective of how to do it. I know there's lots of other videos on YouTube out there that'll tell you how did they do it, and I'm not saying any of those are wrong, but I've helped probably, I don't know, hundreds of people get into this hobby over the course of my time playing with it. And I know what works and what doesn't work when it comes to getting someone to stick around and stay. Because a lot of times people go to stores, and the store's just trying to sell you stuff, so they don't give you enough information, and they're going to make you make mistakes. And it's the fact that they're going to say, hey, buy this model because of X reason. You're going to buy it, and then you're not going to either like the way it looks or the way it plays, or maybe both, and then you're going to start losing interest in the hobby. And that's the mistake that a lot of Games Workshops and other local stores, primarily Games Workshop, I'm not trying to bash on Games Workshop, but I'm just saying They have a sales quota they need to meet, and to do that, they just push the product, and that's what they should do. They're salesmen. They're not going to try and tell you this is the best decision. They're not going to be like, here's the best box of guys, just buy these and you'll have fun and you'll like them, because that's not how their sales model works. So what I'm going to do is explain 2 ways on how to basically start Warhammer 40,000. The best knowledge I've ever gotten from anybody over the years about how to start Warhammer 40,000 is you break it down into a hobby pie. And a pie chart, sorry. So everyone's hobby pie chart is going to be different, slightly. Some people it's even sections, and other people it's heavily on one side or the other. So basically what I mean by a hobby pie chart is some people like this hobby for the models, some people like it for the painting, some people like it for the playing of the game, some people like it for the collecting reasons, some people like it for many different reasons. The building, the conversions, people like it for the fluff, people like it for lots of different reasons. So basically, the way you break this sort of down is, you break it down between, do I like this game because of the way it plays, or do I like this game because of the modeling and the painting? And if you're heavy on the playing side, it's going to what you should start with is different, in my opinion, than what you should start with if you're heavy into the modeling side. So let's say you're a 50-50 shot. If you're a 50-50 between, I kind of like the models just about as much as I like playing the game, or I'm getting into this hobby because I think the game looks really cool, or I'm getting into this hobby because the models look really cool. If you're getting into the game because the models look really cool, I recommend you go to the wall and look at Fantasy and both 40K, or go to the website or Games Workshop website. You don't have to buy it from them. Just saying, go to their website, look through the miniature ranges of the different armies, find one model that you just like, that's awesome. I want that model. That model, to me, is like awesome sauce. I don't care what it does. You're not going to care what it does, because you're just like, that model is so badass. I just can't wait to paint it and build it. It looks like a fun project. If that's who you kind of are, I recommend you start with buying that model, buying all the paints and stuff that you need for that model, and then hit up your local gaming store or hit the internet and see some basic techniques to help you get started with that model. Sometimes there's how-to videos on the Games Workshop website that will take you a step-by-step guide of how to build, paint, and do the model, or put together the model, and those are really good. If you can't find those, there's lots of other guys. You can go to miniwargaming.com. There's a bunch of other guys that do great video and painting tutorials, and that's what I recommend you do. Pick up some basic brushes and some paint and some glue, and you're off to the races, good to go. Now, if you're the other half, so if you're all about what the stuff does, still kind of consider the models into consideration, because you don't want to play with models that you don't like the way they look, or maybe you don't care. If you don't care completely, then what I recommend you do is basically start with the basic troops of the army. So if it's Space Marines, you're looking at Tactical Marines and Scouts. Buy a box of them, build them with the rule book in hand, and look up what those rules all do, and then kit them out with what you think you're going to want them to do. So typically, you're going to get a box of 10-man tactical squads. A very good way to kit them out, if you don't know what they're going to serve on the purpose of the battlefield, is just put them together and don't put together the special weapons or the heavy weapons. So leave 2 of the models unequipped with their weapons. And what I mean by this is basically, and the sergeant as well is probably good idea to leave naked. So build 7 of your Space Marines fully built with just bolters, because that's all they can take. And then build 3 Space Marines separately, the sergeant and the 2 special weapon guys, completely separate. And just basically put the base on, the body on, and the head on, and leave the arms with the weapons holding the arms off until you're ready to decide what weapons you're going to use. In the meantime, the best thing to do is use maybe a different color backpack or a different type of backpack to represent them on the battlefield. So if you want a multi-melty, you can say it's a backpack with this symbol, or maybe make a little paint mark on them to say, hey, this is the red mark, he's got the melta, he's the blue mark, he's the sergeant, and so on and so forth. And once you've done that, then you're not committing to a build yet. Another option would be to magnetize them. Again, look at Mini Wargaming, look at online guides I recommend. Like again, Mini Wargaming, there's a few others. I know I'm going back to those guys because they do so much content, but there's magnetizing guides online on how to magnetize your miniatures. And then, again, it's more time and investment, but if you're a competitive player, magnetizing is a very, very good idea. Once you have your box of troops, definitely pick up both the main rule book and the codex you want to play. The reason we want to do this is because if you're a player, you're going to want to know how to do everything in the game, what everything does. And on top of all this, you're not really going to get to play with just 5-man or 10-man tactics troop squad. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go online, look at battle reports, reference the rule book, and kind of just try and follow along on how it works. Again, I'm not going to get into details about the movement and the shooting in the assault phase and the psychic phase because I just don't feel it's necessary. It's already been done enough on so many other people's channels that I'm not going to get into details on how to play Warhammer 40k. I'm going to be discussing primarily tactics. I just thought it'd be a good idea to give you my perspective on how to start this game for the long run, because I don't care that Games Workshop makes more money if people just buy a bunch of starter sets and a bunch of battle forces and then quit 3 weeks later. I don't want you to be that person. I want you to enjoy your hobby as much as I do, and I want you to be able to not feel like you wasted your money. This is not a cheap hobby. I don't care what anyone says. All hobbies are expensive, but in retrospect, plastic models shouldn't be as expensive as they are, but they are. So accept it. Like if you don't like the price, I would say this hobby's not for you. Just move on to the next thing. Just go and do Magic the Gathering, or if that's your thing, or video games. They're all much cheaper than this hobby can be. That being said, you can find a lot of stuff secondhand online. There's lots of good Facebook things, and I can give you some links in the future on where to get some used miniatures if you really don't care about ever painting them. That's something might be worth looking into for you. Other than that, once you have your book at hand, you're going to know what the basic troop does. You're going to realize that you pretty much need them in almost every game, because they're never going to be useless to you, because you're always going to want to have a troop. You're always going to need to have a troop. And as we get into rules, obviously you can do unbound armies, which means you don't have to have troops. In my opinion, that way isn't played often enough to ever really be considered, in my opinion. And I mean that based on my experience. I have only played with an unbound army maybe one time in the last, 40, 50 games. So I mean, realistically, it's almost not even worth mentioning that unbound at this point basically means you're not following any rules to how you're building your army. On top of that, anyway, guys, so that's my thoughts. Basically, if you go to any Games Workshop, they're going to tell you different. They're going to say this starter box, Dark Vengeance, is the best value, and they're right. It is the best value. You will get the most amount of miniatures and the most amount of product for your money, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that starter kit if you like one of those two armies. Realistically, I don't think anyone should be forced into one of two armies when they start this hobby, because that's just a setup, in my opinion, for failure as a long-time hobbyist. If you don't like those two armies, and then all of a sudden 3 months later you were like, you know what, I really like the Eldar, or you know what, I really like Dark Eldar, I really like Tau. And all of a sudden you're like, I have all these Chaos Space Marines and Dark Angels that nobody wants. You can't sell them because the Dark Vengeance kit models are almost worthless. And you're just basically stuck with all these plastic toys that you spent, $600 or $150, $160 getting built and put together. And you maybe have even bought the rule book for them. And you're like, I don't like them. After all that, I don't like the army. And at this point, Games Workshop business idea thinks that you're hooked now. They're like, oh, we got you because whatever. And then basically half of the people who have money are basically stuck with a decision now. Oh, excuse me. So they're stuck with the decision of, do I continue to play with this army until I get enough money to buy the army I actually want to be playing with, or do I just abandon this and then invest another $200 into the startings of a new 500-point army, which is roughly a good size for a starting army. You're going to basically investing another $200. That beginning money you spent is basically wasted on stuff that you just never needed in the first place. And then I guess a lot of times people try to pawn this kit off to the Dark Vengeance kit off to friends and whatever, and normally people you can't even give it away. Like I've been giving away bits and pieces of the ones that I've gotten like for days, and or for years, and people still don't want the Ravenwing bikes, or they don't want the Tactical Marines. There's I have so many Dark Angel Tactical Marines and so many Chosen that it's unreal. Like there's just so many of them that I have in my possession that I had to just start throwing them in the garbage because there's just no one wants them. Like you can't build armies with them. You need to buy specific things for your army, and once there's an overflow of one type of model, it's just kind of pointless. So I know that other people are going to say, oh, this is stupid, I'm going to buy the Dark Vengeance kits because I like the way both those armies look. If that's you, go ahead. Go right ahead. If you like the way that those armies look, awesome. You just lucked out, basically. You're just like in the exception to say, I like one of these armies very much, then yes, that's a good box for you. You can also kind of mimic this with a battle force, although some of the battle forces now are kind of, they're really weird. They're not like they used to be. They used to be really balanced. You used to get like about 3 units, and now they're kind of just up in the air because of all the releases happening so quickly. You've kind of just compiled them into like other limited release boxes and stuff. But you can get one of those boxes too if you like what's in that box. Go for it. But yeah, that's basically my thoughts on how to start 40K. Start small. Like just get a small box of guys, a small box of paints, and you'll be happy, because realistically, at that point, once you finish painting and reading the rules about your army, you're gonna, or the model that you bought, if you don't like the way that the game, and you've seen a game played or two, and maybe you've gone to the store and you've played a quick demo game with somebody at the store, you're gonna know whether or not this is for you or not. So, yeah, I think that way. Every time I've brought people in the hobby that way, most of the time they're like, thank you for talking me out of the Dark Vengeance kit, because I understand what you mean now, because there's people trying to get rid of them all the time on me, because I'm a new player and I'm playing with other new players in my community, and all of them have this Dark Vengeance kit, so all I'm playing against is Dark Angels and Chaos Space Marines. So, and you know what, I feel bad for them, because they're basically just trying to get other armies that they don't want to play these other two, and it's hard for them. So I hope all this makes sort of sense to you guys, and I hope this video or this recording is actually half decent. But that's basically the beginnings of the intro for me, and I'm hoping to get this channel kind of up and going posting a video probably daily, answering questions for new players and even existing veteran players. I have almost all the codexes and have played with most of them, so I can probably give you pretty good advice on what to do when you're starting an army. So if you want, leave a comment below about which army you would like me to recommend, what you should buy for that army. So if you wanted to start, for example, Chaos, or not Chaos, that's a bad example. Let's say Demons, I can recommend you which Demon kit to take and which books to buy. That's what I'm going to do for this first video. This is going to be kind of an exception. After this video, or after this video recording, I'm going to be doing in-depth tactics on each individual book. Probably going to start with Space Marines, just because they're kind of the flavor of the day. They just came out, and everyone's kind of talking about them. And thanks for listening, guys. Please leave a comment below, and like and thumbs up this video if you could. That'd be great.